Folks online, we're going to be starting shortly, so probably in about 5 minutes or so. By the way, Dan, Needy Joshua says hello.
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 Tested at the lab. On average, they are testing 200 every month, breaking down more than six a day. It takes about 125 days to get results.
Well, drug overdoses in the U.S. rose slightly last year, but experts are seeing some hopeful signs now.
And I will ask you all to mute. We'll have some time for questions a little bit later. Wow, you guys all got quiet quick. That was nice. So we have kind of a different board meeting tonight. We have quite a few representatives from the port in regards to the Heights development. And I wanted to make sure that everybody who are new, everyone who's new on our board, as well as those of you who have been here a while, can kind of hear how we got to where we are today, what some of the updates are, because there's lots of things happening and lots of moving parts, shall we say. So I think we're gonna call to order and we're gonna start with an update from Andrea on public art.
I'm gonna kick things off with an overview and then turn it.
The port's in charge, so.
You guys have other business stuff you need.
No, actually, it's all you folks. So
Okay.
present here, did you say? Yeah, just kind of right here, because I think that will be, the owl should follow you in.
And you will
theater.
allow me to share my.
I will, absolutely. Let me just do this. Yeah, okay, so, and I will share you. There you go. It should be happening soon.
I'm done.
There we go.
Oh, right. I know that they have things. So make sure you're putting it around. All right. Well, good evening. Thank you so much for having us. Catherine Sarnke with the St. Paul Port Authority. I oversee our development team. I presented to you guys previously on the Heights project, so I'm excited to be back. Be some familiar faces and lots of new faces. And I will not be offended at all if you go get food while it's hot and warm and delicious. While I'm talking, so that's great. And this is Andrea Novak. She's with the St. Paul Port Authority, and she has been overseeing a lot of our community engagement especially our work groups that we have been having. And I wanted to introduce the newest member of our Port Authority team. Rick Howden is here. He's a new project manager with the port, so I would not pepper him with your questions just yet. Say those for Andrew and I. And George Heaney is here as well. He is working on the with the construction and design team oversight. So, and we've got some consultants here to talk specifically about environmental needs and our grants. And then we've got our housing partners that I'm excited to introduce you to later this evening as well. So I don't have a full list of all the people here, but you can go ahead, Mark. Oh, I think you just have to do the, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So just a reminder of who we are. St. Paul Port Authority is a statewide economic development agency created back in the 20s. At that point, we were focused on river commerce. In the 50s, the state expanded our powers to get into economic development. And our mission is being a conduit to quality jobs, increasing the tax base, advancing sustainable and equitable development, and advocating for a working river. So we are here to talk about the Heights. I'm guessing you guys all know very well the site we're talking about. So I won't belabor the points, but it does include the old driving range, but the last is sometimes a question. Go ahead. So June of 2022, the master plan was approved. Up to that point, the city has sort of been leading the efforts on community engagement and outreach around developing this master plan. We were very involved since we had purchased the property in 2019. But this was the final plan adopted by City Council back in June, almost a year ago. So where have we been since then? On this figure, to remind folks or let you know, the purple is the light industrial area that the port will be developing. The red on top will be multifamily housing led by introduce them, but Sherman Companies and JO Companies, Sherman Associates and JO Companies. And then the yellow lower density housing will be led by Habitat in partnership with Sherman as well. Okay, perfect. So we took that master plan and we said, what could be here? What buildings would fit here? We were trying to make sure that there was room to develop some of these things. So these buildings are not what is going to be built, but this was our first concept after the master plan was approved of what could be on these sites. And we've been using this as part of our marketing materials to help let folks know what can be here. But so this is sort of a representation of how many buildings there could be. This big site that's labeled as I, we just announced that Excel Energy will be our anchor tenant and they will be taking up that site. We have yet to see, well, we have a meeting with them Friday, I think, George,
Yes.
to see their latest layout and what they're planning for the site and how that's going to look. So we're excited to see things come into life out here, but we're excited to be able to introduce the housing team to give you an idea of what they're thinking about tonight too. Okay, thanks. So Port Authority or jobs mission, tax base and conduit to job opportunities. You know, we heard the largest employer on the east side was Cub Foods. And that 33% of households make less than $35,000 a year. What we're trying to bring in the light industrial areas out here are jobs that make a living wage and housing that if you have a job on the site, you can afford to live in that housing. So our goal is to bring 1,000 living wage jobs. Go ahead to the next slide. Some of those job opportunities will come on this 54 acres of new industrial land, splitting that into 6 parcels. We think our investment of $50 million in infrastructure will spur over $100 million in private investment in these businesses, and roughly about $400 million on the housing side when we get there. Okay, so yeah, we know there's a housing shortage all over St. Paul. So that includes the greater east side. So there's 25 acres that were zoned for housing, and T1 is the higher density. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. Anyway, it's a mix of the higher density to the north of the site and the lower density along the western edge of the site. And I'm not gonna steal too much of the other team's thunder, so they'll tell you about what they're planning for mix of affordability and types and things. Go ahead. Okay, that's okay. Hit on that one. So we are pushing really hard on this project for sustainability. We are driving towards a carbon-free community. We realize that comes with a hefty price tag and are trying to find ways to work with partners that are interested in helping us figure out how to overcome that cost difference between business as usual, we would say, and carbon-free community. So we know that's a challenge to get to carbon-free, but we're pushing as hard as we can to get there. And we're really excited with all the partners that we've been working with so far that have sort of really, you know, sustainability is part of what they're driving towards as well. Parks and green space, I will just say that there will be a 5 acre, almost 6 acre public park. And there will be lots of amenities and hopefully green space and trails around the site. You can see some of those on some of the images and graphics to come. Yes, question.
Is on the topic of carbon free, is there a plan to reroute 64N route, for instance, through this development?
So we have started conversations with Metro Transit on bus routes. And we are planning enough room on Larpenteur Avenue to allow for a bus stop for this project. Metro Transit is a little unique in that they won't commit to providing a new route until the ridership is approved. So it's a little bit
Well,
of
they
a
wouldn't
chicken
need
and an egg
a new
situation.
route. I mean, the 64N goes within half a mile. Let's
Correct.
just add another half.
So I think it's highly likely they will reroute that to take it an extra block to come pick up right at the north end of the site. I'm not gonna guarantee that, because we haven't heard that from them. So I think that's likely. And then we're also hoping that there could potentially be a new bus line or sites.
Thank you.
Yes. I can't hear very well. Oh, I
No,
can't.
he
Okay.
can. So I just wanted to make sure that the owl was doing its job.
Okay, so that's sort of the background. Any questions on the background information? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Andrea to tell you about some of the public engagement that we've been doing and what we've been hearing from the community. This group has been fabulous to partner with in community events and bringing information. So please continue to not hold back on information and let us know what you want in your community, and we will try and help make it a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and I see a few familiar faces. I know Joan's on our public art committee. I know we've talked at some of the different community meetings. Can I just get a raise your hand if you've been involved in any community meeting that's tied to the Heights? Okay, so we have a pretty good scattering of people. So that kind of helps me know, do I go back to the beginning in a quick fashion? Or do I just say where we're at today? So at a high level, we have been working with the community on what it is they would like to see at the Heights. And actually, the name The Heights came directly from the community. At no point did we even have any idea that that should be or could be a name. Joan was actually part of that committee as well. We're like, do we want Hillcrest in there? And literally everyone on this committee said, no, we don't. We want something new. We want to have something that's unique and new and something to look forward to. So we also, in the summer of 2021, worked with Lisa. So Lisa has been our partner. So when I say we've done community engagement, we've done community engagement with your community, with this group. We have been out there sharing interns, doing a lot of different things. So the summer of 2021, we went out in the community and we went to events and we hired a group called Monocat Data. They came and did focus groups. They did online surveys. We had our interns in front of Cub Foods. We had them in front of we probably had here everywhere. Like that was their summer job. And we had 2 of them and they hit the streets. And so with that, we got a really good sampling of data of what's important to people. And one of the things that we also found, some of the highlights that we found was that affordability was, even though if you look at our Facebook feeds, you'll have people saying they don't want affordability. But yet when you start talking to people, affordability is big. Other things that became really big is people want to see recreation. They want to have something in their neighborhood that they can take pride in, that is going to complement the neighborhood without raising the prices to the point where the people that live here, call this home, can't live here. So those are things that we learned from the community engagement. And those were things that are already part of the master plan for the most part. So we then just found that there were some key areas where people really wanted to talk. Some people were very much interested, what is the urban design going to look like? And I know Rachel is on the call and she was on our urban design committee. Sustainability, we talk about sustainability. So we had a committee that kind of helped us, how can we take a look at the sustainability measures we would like to do, what's feasible, and who can help us through that process. Then housing was a big one. So we created a work group that was focused just on housing to understand what was important on that aspect. And then we divided out outdoor spaces. So again, outside of the 5-acre parks, you have to remember that 5-acre park is going to be activated by the city of St. Paul Park and Rec. So we all seem like it's coming from the city, but we're all in different areas. So, but with that said, the Parks Department has been at our meetings, all of our public art meetings, all of our urban design meetings, our outdoor spaces. So you did outdoor spaces, and now we're doing public art. And really the whole purpose of this is to say, you know, we hear that kind of that thing, well, you're just gonna do what you're going to do. Well, there is a box, right? There is a box, there's a master plan. We've seen the master plan. This is what's going to happen. And so now our job is to take that and bring it to life. So obviously there are things like budget constraints and zoning and all different things that we have to fit in there. But there's also opportunities for the neighborhood and for the community to put their print, their stamp on it. So that is what we've been focused on. And so one of the biggest things that you're going to see, and we heard this loud and clear, was that we talk about Beacon Bluff. Raise your hand. Do you know, does anybody not know what Beacon Bluff is? Okay, so we all know what Beacon Bluff is. So we came to the community saying, we've really hit these great numbers with jobs in Beacon Bluff, and we thought Beacon Bluff was great. And that is our biggest success story. And a lot of people got that, right? But then we started hearing people say, that is not what we want to see in our neighborhood. We heard that over and over and over. And so the architects at LHB listened to that and said, okay, we can put together this arts and entertainment. Employment, I would say arts and employment district. So if you go to our website, you can see it's the idea that you got these boxy buildings. Okay, so nobody wants that. You don't want that in your neighborhood. So they came up with a concept to put artwork on those buildings and to stagger landscape across those buildings. So now when you're walking by, you'll see the landscaping, you'll see the artwork, and then you'll be like, oh, okay. And the building is there, but the building is secondary. And so, for example, here's a picture of an industrial building, right, that has some of that art. So again, it's not this just building that's just plain, it becomes part of the neighborhood. So those are things that are happening on the art standpoint. So right now, the work group that we're focused on is the public art group. And the public art is, we're not talking about what is the artwork going to look like. One of the things I heard from the community is we want this to be an opportunity to tell a story. What is the story of this neighborhood? And the story of this neighborhood is we have a lot of people who are merging together that are coming from a lot of different areas. We have multi-generational residents, we have multicultural residents. So how do we find a way of telling the story that tells the story of everyone that's merged together? And I guess, Joan, would you say that matches your experience?
Yeah.
So it's having all of these conversations so that Forecast Public Art, who is our vendor and partner in this, can take all of this information and create a community influenced public art master plan. So that if you go back to the master plan from the city, it talks about here's opportunities for art. And now we're going back and saying, and the neighborhood wants to see this and this and this. And then the artist will be coming in. And again, it's sort of the idea that when an artist comes in, it's not a free, it's not an open canvas. It's not just do whatever you want. It's here's the inspiration. And how do you help us tell the story with arts? And so that is really what's happening from that standpoint. So any questions? Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
It's a good start.
I will say too, if any of you think of, because I'm really good about leaving a meeting and thinking of questions on the way home. If any of you do have questions, you can always send them to me and I can forward to the right person at the port to answer.
And I should also say, if you go to sppa.com, we have areas where you can ask questions, and if it's specific to the Heights, just go to our website, and up at the top, it'll say the Heights, use it as a drop-down box, and there's contact us boxes everywhere, and it comes directly to my email, so.
We have some good pictures and somebody's renderings are up there and stuff, so. There you go. Once again, I'm gonna ask you to please make your way to this end of the room and,
Smells good.
ready to pause before I introduce our next presenter. Who's gonna be the first brave person?
All right, I will be.
All right, Jen.
So, well, if I tell you the next topic is gonna be environmental remediation and cleanup and how we're gonna fund it, does that make you more want to
Hungry.
get- And there's some soda, some caffeine over here as well. Well, that
Spurs the appetite more than.
That's right, that's right. So please. So for those that are online, I'm sorry, you don't get to taste these delicious looking egg roll. But I will. Here's my.
I'm with Habitat. Yeah.
Online folk, we are muted briefly just because people are grabbing food, so give us a few seconds and we'll start back up.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Online folks, I am just gonna close the window briefly so I can open up another PowerPoint for later. Okay, online folks, we are back.
All right, thank you so much for indulging the folks here, chance to get a little food. Just wanted to update folks, a little bit on some of the project timeline items.
We started again, folks at the end of the table.
So I mentioned that we purchased the site back in 2019. The master plan was completed in a year ago. And we are hoping to start construction in June. So keep your fingers crossed that our permits all come into place and we're in stages. And so that construction is going to start with stormwater protection. You'll see silt fence. One of the saddest parts of this project, I know it will hardly see, is the tree removal. We will be removing a lot of trees to redevelop that site. We are going to try to be recycling a lot of that wood, repurposing it, using some of it on site for art or creative play structures. We're also working with some organizations to take that art and have other people reuse it. One of the groups is called Wood in the Hood, if you're familiar with them. So you'll see those activities first. Then likely you will start seeing some of the remediation that Braun Intertech experts are going to tell you about in a little bit. What that really is going to entail and look like. The key piece of that I think you guys are aware of, that we've heard from the contractor, is one way you can tell what kind of soil is coming off the site. If it's going south on McKnight, likely it's contaminated material going to SKD landfill for disposal. If it's going east on Larpenteur, odds are it's clean soil, just looking for a new home, either at East St. Paul or Oakdale, probably. So that's just the little tip to say, oh, should I be worried about, is there dust from that truck or dust from this truck? And you guys will tell you the information on that. We hope to start footings and foundation for our first industrial building late this year, and start some of our infrastructure work. Yeah. And some of the first housing units, we hope to start doing our footing this at the end of 2024 next year. So we're trying to do things fast. It's a 112-acre site and it won't all happen at once. Especially coming out of the ground. So we're working pretty hard. We're going to get the remediation, the demolition done as quick as we can. There's a lot of dirt to move around out here. And then we put in the roads and utilities. And at that same time, we'll be turning it over to folks to build vertically on the developed paths. So we think it'll probably take 10 years for full build out. We're hoping it will be all said and done. Hopefully we'll be done by 2030. But really looking forward to an exciting project out here, but want to make sure that you guys are in the know. We are working on a direct mailer, a postcard to go to everyone within a mile radius, is that right? Mile radius of the site that will have our website, a QR code to ask questions, a phone number to call if you have questions during construction or something comes up and you're worried about it. And as always, if there's some sort of emergency, like you smell gas or something, please call 911 for emergency items. Otherwise, call us and we have a hotline to the whole team to figure out how to get something solved. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our experts from Braun Intertech. We got Ken Larson and Mark Kiefer. They have been working on the plan, identifying what contamination is out at the site and how best to clean it up, and working with our partners in the regulatory agencies, both Department of Ag, who we're lucky enough to have with us today, and the Pollution Control Agency, so to make sure that we're doing everything in the best possible way. Okay, turn it over to you guys.
Well, I'm Ken Larson. I'm an environmental engineer with Braun Intertech, and I've been the project manager on this project working with my colleague Mark Kiefer. And site contamination. It's in this case caused by historic use of this site as a golf course. And you might think, how in the world would a golf course get contaminated? Well, it happens, and it happens more than you would believe. There's widespread mercury contamination out there, and that's primarily due from the historic use of fungicides. And that fungicides, that's fungal growth or mold. And the fungicides were used in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the early 90s before this product was banned. It was a mercury solution that they would spray on the grass to prevent increasing conditions came, it would keep the mold from growing and killing the grass, which is important for the golf courses. But a little bit of mercury over a lot of applications in a lot of years causes the concentrations of mercury in the shallow soil to get elevated compared to what we look at as appropriate use standards to develop. So through this process of investigation and working with the Department of Agriculture, we've identified where the contamination is, which basically mimics the tees, the fairways, and the greens of former the golf course. And also, they had maintenance buildings. They had underground storage tank where they used petroleum products and maintained equipment. But that's there's some minor contamination of that type at the site, but that's really relatively minor compared to the and very localized to those specific areas. And there were also 100 years of previous buildings that were dozed over and we found them in wooded areas and in piles and mixed with soil and buried in some cases. And all of this is the result or the contamination that we need to address for the future of the site. For the regulatory agencies involved, we have, as Catherine mentioned, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And they address contamination from use and storage of agricultural chemicals. So the fungicides, pesticides, or fertilizer use. And then the Pollution Control Agency addresses all other contamination like the petroleum and some of the solid waste issues that we're dealing with. I'd like to introduce you to two people from the Department of Agriculture who are here with us today and kindly are joining the meeting, Josh Liebel and Stuart Orlowski, who have been with the project from the early parts of our investigation, overseeing our work, providing comments, and they've most recently reviewed our cleanup plans. Now, the site is entered in both the voluntary investigation and cleanup programs of both MDA and with MPCA. So all documents have been reviewed by two different agencies for conformance with standards. What type of mercury concentrations are we talking about? I have a little table there that we're finding it on the greens and fringes, tee boxes and fairways. For comparison purposes, I have a residential cleanup standard of 2.7, what the mg per kg, that's milligrams per kilogram or parts per million. So 2.7 parts per million. 3.1 is the cleanup standard for commercial industrial use. On the fairways and tee boxes, the highest concentrations are really only about 5 or 7 parts per million. So above the standard, but not mostly above the standard. But where they really used it was on the greens, and that's where we had concentrations up to 161 parts per million. Now, the mercury in this case is kind of adhered to the soil. It hasn't gone very far. It's usually in the upper 6 inches to maybe a foot along the fairways and tee boxes. So it's kind of that upper grass zone and the root zone and a little bit into the soil. And in the greens, it extends maybe down up to 2 feet, 1 to 2 feet at the most. So that those are kind of the concentration ranges and comparison to cleanup standards. So next one. So how does that look relative to, this is the north end of the site. So on the left of the figure there, you have Lower. And then McKnight is up on the north, and you can see the different shadings are mimicking the former fairways and the tee boxes and greens where we found contamination above the cleanup standards. And once we got into the roughs and into where the trees are and in most other locations, we weren't finding any of the elevated. So go to the next one, you'll see the south part of the site. And you can see kind of in the upper middle part, that's where the maintenance area is, where that orange is. We have some debris and berms that have been pushed up into the wetland and just old solid waste that is not really that contaminated, but needs to be managed. I mean, it's a nuisance and has to be addressed, but we can kind of see the that mimics the old the golf course. So next one. What does it look like from the sky? This is a drone photo. It's kind of neat that you can see the light brown. This was taken just right after a winter melt here a couple of years ago. that there's a different grass types in the fairway, and you can really tell when you're in a former fairway versus the rough. And as we do the cleanup, it's gonna be very easy to determine where the perimeter of our excavations need to be to, manage the contamination. So it's, nature has color coded it for us in this case. So now I'm going to talk to you about a couple cleanup documents that were prepared for the site. The first is called an analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives, or an ABCA. This was prepared in September of 2022, and this was not a document that was a specific to Department of Ag or MPCA, but this was one we actually prepared as a requirement of US EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's a requirement for sites that are being considered for EPA or federal funding with the grant programs. And it's really a big picture document where we look at and summarize what we know about the site history and what the types of contaminants are, where they're located, who has cleanup oversight responsibility, like this very big picture telling EPA what is out there, how it can get cleaned up, cleanup criteria and applicable laws and regulations governing cleanup. And they have you look at 4 potential alternatives for cleanup. So EPA wants you to assess everything from no action. They actually want you to say, well, if you did nothing, would that meet your criteria? And then look at 3 others. And you compare those, and does it meet the project goals? So does it meet the ability to be protective of public health for future users and also facilitate redevelopment? So when you look at the effectiveness of the cleanup technology, its implementability, or how it does it, we work it in with the site constraints and then overall costs. So on this site, in addition to no action, which actually doesn't work because it doesn't meet the requirements for development or protection of public health. We looked at phytoremediation, which is basically utilizing, it's a technology where you use specialized plants or trees that are designed or selected to uptake the contamination and take it out of the soil. It's something that you basically would then plant and harvest and plant and harvest. And it's a much longer process. We also looked at the traditional contaminated soil excavation and disposal of limited landfill. And then an alternative that included that plus on-site soil management, where you take some of the lower level contaminated soils and where applicable and appropriate and with regulatory agency approval, you're able to manage on site and place with appropriate covers and protection so that it's safe for the future users. Yes.
So is this mercury in liquid form, like liquid micro droplets?
It's in inorganic form. It's not the same type that gives off vapors, or it's not the elemental mercury. It's
a mercury compound?
Yeah, it's a mercuric. Back to my history. No, there we go.
It's an inorganic mercury salt, so it's mercury 1 and mercury 2 chloride is what.
Yes, mercuric chloride.
Fine.
The product, was called Calipor. So it's not the same as you would, if you broke the thermometer and you're playing with the mercury, and that's not what we have on here, so it's a little different with that. That's a good question. And then, so we looked at all 4 of those and we're able to eliminate no action again, because it just wouldn't be work with this site. Phytoremediation takes way too long and it's not proven at with this contaminant at this levels at so it came down to those final 2 alternatives, and actually alternative 4 was selected as for further consideration, though actually 3 and 4 are very, very similar. Just to give you an idea of the total cost of environmental cleanup there based on the total volume of soil out there, which we might have 50,000 cubic yards of soil that needs to be managed and properly disposed of. We're talking $3 to $4 million. And Steve will get into the grants and how this is some of the funding sources apply to that. The second document is called the response action plan, or a corrective action plan sometimes, or a cleanup plan. It's basically the technical document that we submitted to the regulatory agencies for review and approval, which they're looking at to make sure that we're what we're proposing is consistent with their guidelines, it's consistent with industry standards. And that was submitted to the MBA and MPCA voluntary programs last fall in September of 2022 as well. And that's a much more detailed document with a more detailed site history. All of the contamination information from our investigations was incorporated. We've identified the site cleanup standards based on future site uses so that the residential areas would meet residential standards, commercial areas, commercial standards, and actually the park and public spaces would also meet a residential standard. Identifies contamination locations, the depths based on our investigations, excavation requirements, including dust monitoring, sediment controls, how we're going to handle the materials on site, if there's any stockpiling covered in the materials, soil disposal requirements, what type of landfills, it's going to a permitted landfill that has the ability to take this material, and then also identifying what type of documentation we need to provide, including post-excavation sampling. So after we've identified the contamination excavated, we can post excavation sampling and testing to demonstrate and show that we met our cleanup standards.
So there is a question online just quickly. Has any other work been done to managing contaminated soil lots in a restorative manner? So not putting in a landfill, but mitigating soil to a clean status off.
It depends on the contaminant type, and the problem with the inorganics, they're very difficult to extract the metals and to create the soil so that it can be reused. In fact, in some cases, what you're ending up doing is having to leach the contaminants out of the soil, taking it from a solid into a liquid, and then having to manage and treat the liquids. Sometimes you're left with the soil then, and particularly when we're dealing with topsoils that are filled with the grass and root zones, it may not be geotechnically suitable or even usable on the site. So then you'd end up having to take that off site, and nobody may want that type of material. So it's really, that's a great question. And for some types of contaminants, we look at doing that and doing treatment on site and extracting the contaminants through, like, if it's organic, like a solvent or petroleum, you can vent the material, you can do creative things with bacteria, which will help eat the contamination and basically turn, the contaminants into the hydrocarbons into carbon dioxide and water. So I mean, there's a lot of neat stuff, but for this type of contamination, unfortunately, landfill is what ends up.
Thank you.
And then I guess as part of the approval through Department of Agriculture, they asked us to prepare a more detailed dust monitoring plan, which we have done, which was submitted for review. And a really big element of our cleanup is to make sure that we're monitoring the dust and collecting samples of the air to make sure that we're providing data so that there's a comfort level that, that we're not spreading contamination. It's not people the site. It is construction. There's a lot of activity, but that's a significant part of our overall approach and plan, and Department of Ag is going to be our partner in that and making sure that we're meeting that requirement. So the site cleanup components, what does it include? Excavating the contaminated soils at the targeted locations and depths. Again, implementing the dust controls and sediment controls. We'll be using water to keep dust down. We'll be doing the monitoring. That's going to be done daily. Loading contaminated soils onto trucks, transporting the soil to the landfill with proper documentation. Every load is going to have paperwork that's tied and make sure that once it leaves the site, it gets to where it's actually supposed to go. We need to conduct post-excavation soil sampling and testing to make sure that when we're done, and by the time we're going to do further excavation, that we're confident that we're meeting the cleanup standards so that we can move forward. So no mass grading is going to occur in any area until we've got documentation samples in that area and submitting that to the agency to show that we're meeting the standards.
I was wondering, when they're transporting that material that is contaminated, what is the effect on the air, or is it gonna be covered?
They cover the trucks, they have tarps.
And depending on the concentration, sometimes they will wrap the entire truck in plastic and seal it, and then they also tarp over that.
For our mercury over 10 part per million, which is all the greens where we have some of the highest concentrations, they're going to actually wrap the soil in poly, and then the trucks will also be covered. So, and that is the more problematic soils, or not, you know, the ones that are the higher levels. The other stuff barely exceeds cleanup standards to begin with, but they will still be covered. But we have to manifest them differently, and the landfills handle them differently because they have higher levels. And again, closely coordinated with the regulatory agencies, and if right now, the on-site management that we spoke of, there's a net export of soil off of the site. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to reuse soil, so it is an option. But at this time, it's looking like all the contaminated soil that we're excavating is going to go off-site. However, if any on-site management is if that option is going to become available, it needs to be approved by the agency, and it would only be, and they dictated it cannot be on residential property. It cannot be on public property. It's not going to be on the park property. You can't use it in wetlands. It would only be on the industrial land. And we just don't have a lot of room on those locations anyway. So
How much is the kind of estimated ballpark cost of this?
the total cleanup cost is right around $3 million.
And who's footing that?
Segue. It's a combination of different grants that have been assembled through EPA grants. There's been some other local grants, Port Authority, you know, it's a combination of.
So it's, none of this is gonna go back to the offending of people who actually laid murder to begin with.
What's interesting though is it was applied for label application. This was a legal allowable thing. So this is one of those situations where it wasn't from gross negligence of, they were just applying what was typically done, and it's been done on many golf courses, particularly the private golf courses that had the money to spend on specialty chemicals and
So it's kind of like an asbestos abatement where asbestos was perfectly used everywhere, everybody had it.
Yep, I almost brought the picture. I've got some people happily spraying mercury and just some guy out there, from the 50s and advertising this calico. And it's just that this was what was done, and that just the best practices that the greenskeepers applied. And you talk to some of the old greenskeepers around town, and this is just what they did.
One used to be a president of this organization, so. Oh, no,
Would it be possible to go back to the slide that showed the areas, the aerial view with the areas of contamination?
Yes.
A little part of that. So I guess what I'm confused, so it sounds like the number 2 option for abatement of using plants and things to absorb the mercury didn't work, so there weren't really plants that would absorb it.
Well, there is some research that under certain controlled conditions, you can get uptake from mercury, but what is going to happen, it might take several years of plants and harvesting, and then you still, the mercury unfortunately doesn't break down. The mercury molecule it goes up into the roots and the leaves, and then you have to manage that. So it doesn't like go away, but we would get it out of the soil. So it's
And again, this has only been done in like a controlled lab environment. I don't feel that this will actually work in the real world.
and what they're finding, or where sometimes it's used on really old industrial properties next to, say, rivers, for example, where it's never going to be redeveloped, but they have a lot of time to reduce the contamination levels. So it is, it's an interesting technology, and it's something that we keep an eye on and look for applications where it can be used, but in cases where especially over this large of an area and having to then do the specialty planting over entire fairways and all over that, it would not meet the timeline. Even if it could be proven it's effective, it would not be able to be completed in time for development to occur.
Yeah, but I guess then what I'm not understanding is, my understanding is the reason we're removing so much of this tree canopy is because they're contaminated from uptake of that mercury, but it looks like the trees are not in the regions because it was sprayed in the fairway, and where the trees are removed.
The problem with the trees are the roots, and that a lot of the trees are right next to the fairways. Some of the process of remediation will damage the root zone and the trees. Some of the trees actually are in the fairways and will have to be removed, but the part of the tree removal is just based on the grading that's needed for redevelopment. Contamination will affect our ability to save select trees, but another factor is just if the tree is at elevation A and in the future, the elevation is needed for development is different, the tree is not going to be able to be saved.
I think that's the piece that just with the different plans, I don't have a lot of clarity on like what percentage of the trees are being removed, how many of them are from contamination versus kind of convenience of redeveloping that area. And just because it'll take a while, even with all these replanting, to have a tree cover eventually reestablished. And the loss of tree cover leads to more heart disease deaths, more lung disease deaths, greater warm pockets. It's a health effect of all the people who are now living there. So I guess that's the piece to me that it'd be helpful to have some clarity of what trees are being removed and, is it everything or is there a strategic strike?
Well, it's certainly strategic and they're trying to save any tree, particularly on the perimeter where they don't have to remove a tree and it's, they're looking at ways to save and or sustainably reuse the trees that have to go. So I guess I would open that up to George or Catherine to discuss further.
Yeah, we've been consulting a lot with the city forester. And gone out and done site walks with them and our landscape architect to try and figure out from a tree quality standpoint, which trees are worth saving. And so we've done that. They actually have another walk planned in the spring now that the trees are starting to bud to make sure that, if there's a tree that's designated as this is worthwhile, has it wintered well? Yes, how they, has it looking like it's still healthy. Yes,
Are they also gonna be planting new trees?
yes, we will be planting a lot of new trees.
Do you know what they are gonna be?
I know it will be a lot of diversity, because the city and the forestry requirements, the emerald ash borer and some of the past diseases on the trees. They don't want a whole street planted with the same species anymore, because they're worried about a disease or a bug, taking those out. So, diverse canopy, but yeah, so a wide variety. I have not seen yet what trees are gonna be in there, but we're working on, we've got the landscape architects working on that.
Okay, the reason I'm asking that, it shows that research has shown that male trees have more allergens than female trees.
Okay.
So if it would be possible to plant more female trees than we would, so, because of the allergy.
I did not know that, so thank you for sharing that information. Rick, you got that?
Yeah, as somebody who suffers from allergies,
Yeah. We do have some information, like a tree survey where we GPS all the trees that are out there and then have a list cross reference with stuff. And so I'd be happy to, I'll give you my card and I can try and send you some more of that information. It is kind of hard to read, so you may want to consult with some of the engineers, but I will make them available for you to help interpret. What is it?
And also just as things are developing too, like the kind of trees that are being put in and focus on native trees, if there's a subgroup that kind of is involved in that. I think a lot of
Yes,
us-
and I will say that we are encouraging that discouraging turf grass and encouraging more native plantings. That's one of the things we heard in the work groups, is that more native species, less manicured, but more natural spaces. So certainly happy to follow back up once we have a more detailed landscape plan.
I think it's safe to say as well that the landscape architects that are tied to the project are very much behind those concepts as well. So
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's where the landscape architects who are actually tasked with doing this really do match up with what the community was asking for from that standpoint.
Yeah, they're very excited about that component. And I will say, I've got just concept drawings, so it doesn't have like the tree types in it yet, but I'm really excited about it. And I almost said, can I share this? And they're like, well, it's not in anything yet. We don't have everybody on board. So the next time we come present, I hope to present you some landscape concept stuff that I'm excited about and to be able to share soon. Yes.
There have been another number of other golf course renovations, reclamations around the area. That one I could think of off the hand is on Beam Avenue near Maplewood Mall, it's just converted to a park. And then the one over here off of Arcade and what is that, Greenway Park or whatever, Frost turns back into Larpenter and cuts that corner. That whole area back there is par 3 golf course. Did they clean them up appropriately, or did they just ignore this problem and sweep it under the rug?
That's a good question.
Involved in those.
What did we?
I cleaned up lots of golf courses, but I wasn't involved in those two, so I can't count as we were not involved in those at all, but. I know I've cleaned up several other golf courses in Twin Cities.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering, are we then also by sitting a time bomb with regard to other golf courses, Keller and what we're here, I forget, just north on Long. Dalen.
So the one nice thing about this Mercury compounds is they're not very mobile, which is why they built up the high concentration right there. And why that's kind of a benefit is that they don't move very far. They kind of stay right there. So yeah, it needs to be dealt with, but luckily it's not like it's reaching down into the drinking water or spreading off site. It's staying very localized. So while it's not ideal, it's better that it's not moving in long distances. So
Most of the other golf courses we've been involved with, it's usually only used on the greens, and we're not finding it many other places. Sometimes there's some contamination around these areas, or where they would manage the clippings off the green. But it's something that we're finding, and people are looking for it more and more now as golf courses are being redeveloped. So the ones that we're involved with, we certainly know to consult our clients that, hey, you better look for this, because that could be a problem.
Okay.
You're the question over there with Needy?
So in terms of the, cleaning up the mercury, does this eradicate the mercury completely, or does this, what is this going?
we're basically putting it into a lamp where it's gonna be safely managed, so it's not gonna hurt.
So the soil that's left behind will all be below, or would meet the cleanup standards, would be pretty much close to, background. So we were finding where it's elevated and above the cleanup standards, once we remove 6 inches, the concentrations drop off significantly. Same with the greens, so.
And we have to do confirmation stamp, so after we remove it, we sample to make sure that there's nothing left behind. Because we might not have gotten it all when we tested our spots around the golf course. So we check those areas to make sure that we've gotten. I don't know, I think of it like a surgeon trying to cut out a sunspot on your head, right? Like they go check the margins and then come back and cut out more if they have to. That kind
So
of
it's an
stuff.
iterative, so if we don't meet the standard, we have to go back and take out more soil until we can demonstrate. Right.
So,
It's not eradicated, but it's taken away from the site.
so there's a chance, so let's just say, do the cleanup and maybe 10, 20 years from now, there's a possibility that
We're removing the source.
Because, the mercury is gone at that point. It's not coming back. And in fact, the chemicals that cause the contamination are banned now and are no longer used at golf courses. So, and in many cases, if you're talking newer golf courses that started in the 90s or.
Well, Phelan's been around forever, I think, hasn't it?
But many of them, But it was usually, again, it was an added cost for so it tended to be, we're seeing it more at the higher end golf courses and the country clubs.
Phelan's been public. So, yeah, so the odds are pretty slim.
We haven't been involved in it, we can't comment.
Yeah.
We haven't been involved in it.
But I know that Department of Ag has done at least a dozen.
Yeah, we've done. Yeah, probably at least a dozen. I've been involved in 3 or 4 different golf course investigations. Yeah, mercury on greens and tee boxes, and it's pretty, yeah, especially with some of these older golf courses, so. But the Department of Agriculture doesn't have, I think to your question, we don't have regulatory authority over products that were legally used. So not all golf courses are required to clean up the legal use of this mercury fungicide. So something that we encourage and will provide, you know, a letter for St. Paul Port Authority, but
When you are reusing a property and redeveloping it, then it
Yeah.
becomes, you know,
Right.
somebody buying the property and it becomes a liability and
And they have to, the development has to meet soil standards that are required for that development.
So we have about a half hour left. Are we doing okay on time, or
Yeah, I
can we
think
take a couple
okay.
other questions? Because I saw Needy's hand up.
I guess it's not really a question, more like a statement. So because I've been in St. Paul for a very long time, and St. Paul is an old city.
Yeah.
And so with, redeveloping St. Paul, the cost is going to be more because the structures are old. And so, I'm all for redevelopment. I think that St. Paul needs it, but in terms of cost and the population that we're doing this for, is there something at the city, at the port to kind of consider, the structures and just kind of consider where the city is at in terms of just the building,
There are no structures on the site right now. That will be saved anyway, because the clubhouse is there, but that'll
It's
go.
an old clubhouse, you're not gonna repurpose it.
And we'll be building new roads, new utilities, it all has to be new, just because the infrastructure doesn't exist across the golf course. Okay, with that, I'm gonna task Steve with being quick, but I want to make sure, if it's not on you, it's on your talking points, that we are, appreciate the questions tonight. We do have a official comment period that's open on our cleanup work that's done. It'll be open until the 19th of June, right? Thank you. So please, send anything to us. You can send it through the website. You can send it to Rick Scott Card. You can send stuff directly to him. He'll be compiling all the questions and responses. And appreciate all your feedback and questions. Anything else you can address? Sorry, this is Steve. He is the master of managing multiple grants sources for a project and saves our butt all the time, as well as looking at liability issues. But tonight we're going to talk about how are we going to pay for cleaning up somebody else's mess.
So I got 2 slides. One of this of funding, so. Really exciting topic, grants, loan, dollars, numbers.
As a nonprofit, we're used to that.
So you can peruse this list a little bit, and what actually the more interesting part is how you get to this list. So you can see, if you look here, you can see there's federal sources of money, there's state sources, Ramsey County has money, Metropolitan Council has money. And this money, the funding sources is like, it's not available to everybody for anything at any time. The Port Authority has to submit grant applications to all these sources, and the funders, they pick what they think is the best projects, and by best, they're looking for projects that provide the most benefit to the community, both at the neighborhood level and at the city at large level. So they're saying, we'll give you money, but how many jobs are you gonna retain? How many jobs are you gonna create? Are you gonna do housing? Are you gonna increase the tax base to take the burden off the local, individual housing people? Your property taxes doesn't have to pay for it all. You've got big companies coming in and pay property taxes. They want to see good community engagement like they're doing here. So, yeah, there's a whole laundry list of things that they're interested in, they feel are benefits. Write the grant applications, get scores, and you get awarded on a competitive basis. And as you can see here, apparently the funders think this is a good project, like their benefits and. Yeah, this $1 million to clean up, that includes 2 different loans, and the loans are like up to amounts. So you got grants that's yours, you pay for it for eligible costs, and then you've got loans if you need more, you can low interest loans. And then the second slide, these are development grants. So the Port Authority has a lot of, they're preparing the site for development. They're grading it, they're putting in infrastructure, they're doing a lot of things. There are certain sources that recognize that it's hard to develop contaminated property. And they provide specific redevelopment money for specific tasks. And we've got these 2 grants for specific infrastructure on specific parts of the site. Doesn't add up to the total number that you need, but
How does this compare cost wise to the Ford plant site cleanup?
I don't know what that cleanup is.
I think it's gonna be a heck of a lot worse there.
It's a big thing.
But it's also a very big site.
Yeah.
It's a one size.
Yeah.
And you guys heard any numbers for?
Not the fourth side, yeah, unfortunately, we're working on that one either.
That wasn't a Port Authority project? The Port
It was
side?
not a Port Authority project, but I don't believe there's, was upwards of 10 on it, but I don't.
Yeah, my head was thinking like 8 to 10.
It was
That
a
wasn't
dirty
all they
site.
wanna promise it.
Yeah.
What that was, I mean, and Ford did pay for.
So we have this money, it's a finite period of time, we have to use it, I think it's about 2.5 years. And we do reporting to all the grantors, they want annual reports, are you providing the job? What is the tax increase? What are you doing for environmental justice? Reports that go out quarterly and annually, and they want to make sure that they're getting what they're gonna provide for them. Well, any questions? I think so.
Spend it well, spend it well.
To get all those grants.
It's really what?
Oh, there's one question.
All these grants and loans coming in, will this do anything to property taxes, having to go up or anything to help pay for this or pay off these loans?
I would say it would, if anything, it's gonna bring property taxes, well, I probably won't bring it down, but it will add to the tax
The day
base.
property taxes go down.
Yeah, you got, instead of open land out there, you're gonna have, industry coming in and increasing the value of the land, they're gonna pay more property taxes.
And these grant programs are existing grant programs. So whether they got used at this site or another
Yeah.
site, they would be there.
I just saw there was a couple $100,000 worth of loan.
Yes, so to repay the loans, one of the things, we're selling some of the property and getting money for the property. So that'll help repay our development costs that go into it. And, we also have some development funds that the Port Authority uses coming in from other work that we do that will help. offset that.
So the Port Authority owns all the property right now?
We do own the entire golf course right now.
Real lovely fence you have.
I am sorry for the. I hope it looks great.
You mentioned this property taxes, so there's no plans to have like deals for different companies like the Google or Amazon where they get exempted from taxes or anything like that as incentives for people building on the site, they will be paying.
Not that I don't want to.
So, we have agreed that we will not have a redevelopment TIF district, which is a tax increment financing that uses the net gain in taxes to pay for the redevelopment. We have said we won't do that. However, because the housing that will be built, we want to be affordable to the people that live there and have some additional affordability quality. We are talking about having a tax increment financing district for the housing. So the additional increment of tax can go back. It's sort of like the developers get a pay as you go kind of thing, right? They put up the money up front and then get repaid as the tax is generated from their development. But it won't increase residents' property tax because it only takes the increment. It only takes the new tax amount over what the golf course had been generating. Does that make sense?
But we're just, I think that my bigger concern is just if there were industries that, you know, oh, if you buy this land and you develop it, then you get kind of exempted or a lower tax rate or something for X number of years, like a lot of cities do to try and recruit big companies like Google and Amazon who have gotten those kind of deals. So they're using the infrastructure, but they're not paying the tax base.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, so we have a couple of developments where nonprofits have wanted to go into our space, and in those cases, we've required people to do payments in lieu of taxes at pilot. So that they're paying the same amount of property tax voluntarily as if they were a for-profit company. You know, the Port Authority's mission is to generate tax base for the city of St. Paul, not take away from it. Some of those programs are state programs, so I can't guarantee they won't happen there, but certainly we don't have any intention of providing big tax breaks to companies to come to this site. We want companies that want to be sustainable, good community neighbors, like the outdoors and the natural component that we're trying to foster here, and that's really who they're looking for. The good news is the Googles and the Amazons, and they want the big distribution facilities. And this isn't a great site to do it. It's not right off the highway, not right off the freeway. I mean, it could be a smaller, you know, not things, saying things won't get distributed from here, but it's not gonna be a big logistics hub like they're building out in Woodbury or Shopton and things like that. Okay. Thank you, Steve. All right, now, finally, we get to introduce you guys to our housing partners. And we are very excited to do that. Dan Collison from Sherman Associates was unable to be here today. He is with us remotely. So hopefully we'll be able to hear him through this fantastic owl speaker. And if we have any issues with that, and I know Johnny O'Para is on as well. And then we want to save some time for Chad Booley, who is in-house with Habitat for Humanity. But Dan, if you'd like to share your screen, that's fine. Otherwise, feel free to let me know and I can advance pictures for you.
Sure. First of all, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'll just have you share it, and I'm going to pass it to Johnny after I do some opening comments. And then we'll have Habitat share. And then after that's done, if I could come back and provide a little bit more detail on the multifamily, I think that would be great. So there might be a little jumping, and I don't know, Catherine, how you have it collated between our presentation and the Habitat presentation, but I guess we'll just kind of work our way through it. You could go to the next slide, please. So first of all, I am the Director of Business Development Public Affairs for Sherman Associates, and come to this company with a tremendous amount of investment in community-based development. As a company, we've been in business over 40 years, owning, developing, managing multifamily and commercial. We believe in long-term ownership and commitment to the communities we're in. And over the length of our history, we've developed over 12,000 residential units. We currently manage around 740,000 square foot of commercial space. We have 5 hotels, 4 Starbucks, 3 restaurants, and 2 solar gardens. And 95% of all we've developed is urban infill or in cities like the wonderful city of St. Paul. We're very dedicated to sustainability and social impact projects. And we specialize in delivering on complex, high-profile projects like the Heights through public and private partnerships. Next slide, please. So we have approached this through a sense of what is a match for not only Sherman, but the team that we've built. We have a whole team of people in our company that are able to focus on the structure of relationships, financing, community engagement. We've also addressed affordability at this site and have a lot of experience with low-income housing tax credit and Section 8 vouchers. And have a lot of relationship experience with many agencies across several affordability levels. And then we'll talk about that in our presentation. Next slide, please. In the sustainability space, even today, Chris Sherman, Johnny O'Para, and myself met with Councilmember Yang, and we had a really extensive conversation about sustainability at the site as well. Working with the Port Authority, had a deep dive into the design and elements of sustainability goals at the site that are front of mind. To this point, we've had a long-term equipment commitment through actual infrastructure related to our projects. Solar gardens in St. Paul, a recent project called Passive House, which is equivalent to LEED and in some ways even advancing, that reduced the bills of our residents at that site significantly, and then have LEED silver and gold achievements across other products. Next slide, please. We love St. Paul. We've been here for 30 years. Most recently, the Verdant Scenic. We had grand openings just last year, and really understand and listen to the voices of the leadership of St. Paul and the residents of St. Paul. We're so excited to work on this project. There's a couple pictures of our most recent projects. Next slide, please. Sherman's team is going to include Coss Wilson, a terrific architectural firm, and then Frana Companies, who we've built significant properties with. You can see some examples here. Next slide, please. And this is what's, I think, thrilling. We come to this lead developer role alongside some of the most remarkable companies who are from St. Paul, in St. Paul, and ready to serve here at the Heights, including JO Companies. And Johnny, you're going to be right up now and work your way through this, and Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. All three of our organizations, as well as additional local and diverse businesses and potential third-party operators and other folks who will benefit from the housing portion of this, will be a distinctly St. Paul East Side, Northeast Side centric development opportunity. But it will take the great leadership of companies like JO Companies and nonprofits like Habitat to deliver everything we're anticipating doing. So Johnny, I think this is the fourth meeting I've had with Johnny today. Take it over.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Can you guys hear me and hear me correctly?
Sure can.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Dan, and so excited to be here today. Very excited about what's upon us, the Heights. And as Dan alluded to, this is a momentous and legendary opportunity to again partner with the great city of St. Paul, the Port Authority, and just everyone in the community about bringing one high quality housing that's sustainable, energy efficient, and most important, it's going to be around for generations, and that's also affordable. So a little background about me. I started the company back in 2009 after being laid off, and just kind of going through that. I learned a lot in terms of understanding that I never wanted to be in that position again, in terms of kind of being in control of my destiny. But more importantly, I got a chance to really understand what it is to be an entrepreneur. And my father was in affordable housing, and that was my first endeavor into understanding in terms of my purpose. What am I supposed to do with my life? I've always been in the relationship business, so I've always wanted to help people, but at the same time monetize it, right? So in 2017, I got my real estate license, and I learned everything I could about the different asset classes surrounding real estate. So whether that be residential, commercial, mixed use, you name it. And since 2017, I've been trying to figure out, one, to my dad, how can I, help him be put in a situation that's, better in terms from a housing standpoint, but two, figure out how I can learn everything about, real estate development. And in 2018, I made my father a commitment that I was going to build him something. Where he was living at was dilapidated, it was old, didn't have the necessary amenities that he needed. My father had a major stroke in 1993. So dealing with atrophy, dealing with the effects of having a major setback from a health standpoint definitely impacted his life. So I took that very seriously as his eldest son. And since 2018, I've been on this journey to, develop and build high quality housing for folks like him, families, individuals that need it most. And I started my first project in St. Paul on the east side, known as the Hollows. I'm not sure if anyone heard of that development. It's on 520 Payne, on 7th and Payne, right outside of downtown St. Paul, kind of the gateway to Lower Town. But more importantly, on this journey, this was a project that I started with my dad. And unfortunately, my father passed away in 2018. So, him passing away was something that obviously changed our lives, but really made it apparent in terms of how important housing affects people's lives. Since 2017, on this journey, we've been making an impact in terms of making sure that we can help change the narrative surrounding what is affordable housing. What does that mean to individuals and families? So since then, we have about 200 million, within our project pipeline. The Hollows, which is an $18.4 million project, in St. Paul, that's bringing 62 homes, high quality homes, to individuals and families, is an exciting, project that has been very successful. In fact, we finished construction in 2022 December, and we're almost fully occupied. Next slide, please. So this is the Hollows. I'm not sure if anyone has seen this. It's on the east side. And, this is, in terms of my view, what high quality housing multifamily should look like in terms of having every amenity you can think of, from, your fitness center, your community room, every, level of, quality you will find in market rate, you're going to find here at the Hollows. This project took me 4 years, strong partnership with neighborhood organizations like the Railroad Island Task Force, partnered with Jack Byers, Executive Director for the Payne-Failing District Council, worked with them for a number of different years. We did a design charrette on the east side. This was a project that not only took a lot of, building relationships and, talking to the community, but, building a true partnership, because at the end of the day, regardless of the relationship with the banks, the city of St. Paul, Ramsey County, all the folks that played in organizations that played a part in bringing the house to life, it was really the immediate community where this asset's going to be at that played a major role in the success of that development. Next slide, please. So basically, in a nutshell, the Hollows really, for me, is something that it really speaks to the urban core, something that allows individuals and families, working professionals, to live at. They have access to transit, underground parking, different unit mixes in terms of studios, alcoves, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, things that we would be bringing to the Heights effectively in terms of providing a level of quality, sustainability that you would only see in areas that may not have that type of caliber or character. We wanted to make sure we brought that to those communities that needed it most. Next slide, please. This is our next project that's actually closing up in the next two months, actually, in Brooklyn Center, Wainsted Commons. This is more of a family style, development. This is going to be providing 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms to this community. This is a relationship that has been built over 4 years as well with the city of Brooklyn Center. So in a nutshell, really, our company is really focused on making sure that, we're providing right-sized housing solutions for cities and communities that need it most. And as I mentioned before, our partner, with the Payne-Failing District Council, working with communities, the city, all the different stakeholders to bring these projects to life, has always been of importance in making sure that as a developer, there's a level of empathy and understanding that, these assets will be in the community forever. And we want to make sure that we're doing right by, having those conversations, listening first, speaking second, to make sure that we are paying attention to what the community's needs. Next slide, please.
Is this one we're coming back to, Dan?
Yeah, I think, Johnny, if there's any other thoughts you want, I'd love for the Habitat team to jump in, and then we can come back to the mix of multifamily and Johnny, any wrap-up comments you have, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Habitat team, thanks for being there. By the way, everybody in the room, I prefer in person like always, and only virtually when necessary. So I apologize for not being able to be in person. I look forward to future meetings and updates over the many months and years ahead in person. Habitat team, thanks for being there in person.
Yeah, hey, we're covering for you, Dan. No
All
problem.
right.
All right, so Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, and we're gonna be very respectful of your time, realizing it's 2 minutes to 8, so we'll kind of wheel through relatively quickly, being able to take a little time to focus on the family parts. And then what we're looking at kind of at the heights, but real quick, we have a couple other folks here. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Sharice Turner, Chief Program Officer with Habitat.
Jackson, Director of Program Association.
All right, and Chad Foley, Chief Real Estate Officer. So let's get right to it. Next slide. We will quickly go through the origins. It started back in 1942 on a commune called Koinonia Farms. It was basically a civil rights movement, African Americans and whites living together, and it basically spawned from there. Next slide. Usually that's about a 7-8 minute slide.
You don't have to go that fast.
Okay.
You're okay.
Just a couple of quick little myth busters. Jimmy Carter did not start Twin Cities Habitat. Oftentimes people think he did. He's just the most famous volunteer that we've had. And he's at this point trying to not show up on site at 98 years old, so, but we give him that. And Habitat does not give the homes away. We are home ownership. It's affordable home ownership, 30 to 80% EMI. And you'll see what that looks like for what that is for a salary for folks. But they do purchase the home. And we are all home ownership at mentioned. Next slide. On the continuum from emergency shelter to home ownership, obviously we are on the home ownership side. So to give you an idea on what that means, if you're a family of 5, our lowest salary for families is $42,000. You have to make $42,000 minimum to purchase one of our homes. A family of 5 on the 80% end makes about $102,000. So workforce housing, teachers, construction workers, et cetera, probably 95% of us in this room would fit into the type of folks that would be living in these homes. Moving right along. Next slide. Real quick, our mission, bring people together to create, preserve, and promote affordable homeownership and advance racial equity in housing. And in our values down below, Habitat started on a Christian commune, faith rooted in faith and community, inspired by hope, making a difference, committed to social justice, anti-racism with a focus on foundational Black home buyers. And we are always driven to innovate. We run about 15,000 individual volunteers per year, building about 70 homes per year, building and rehabbing 70 homes per year. We keep people busy. We create home ownership. We help families that are in their homes, keeping them stabilized by helping them. We spend a lot of our time and effort advocating for our families at the state, city, you name it. We do have, if anybody's interested, we have a global engagement part where we actually travel to partner affiliates around the world and build homes in those locations. And if you haven't seen or been to our resource, go spend money there as soon as you can. Next slide. All right, next slide.
Home creation. All right, this is what we do. We get people in homes, right? But we start with community engagement. That is so important. I heard that was a common theme today, is understanding what the needs are in the community, and we have to start there. And then we are very much focused on our consumers, understanding what their unique barriers are and really try to eliminate that with our one-on-one coaching. And then just supporting them through their home buying process. So they don't have to do this alone, we're gonna ride along with them. And then the home choices. You would see a little bit of that, I think, further down the slide. Okay, perfect. So you can either, our traditional model is building from the ground up, the volunteers, or we can purchase homes in the market, rehab them, and then sell them back to our consumers. And then open market, where they're able to work with a real estate agent and use our lending product to keep that home affordable for them. And we take pride in not only helping them get into home ownership, but sustaining that through our post-purchase support. Next slide. Outcomes. This is no secret. When you're a homeowner, you feel good. You're part of the community.
your kids do better, feel a bit healthier, I'm going to the doctor a little bit less, right? That is so important because you think about that social determinants and how we're contributing that. I always say that you think about home ownership is or stable housing is the glue that keeps it all together. Next slide. A little bit about our families. As you can see, our average household income is a little bit over $54,000. Who we primarily have served our East and West African immigrant community. But then who are the professionals that we're serving every single day? The bus drivers, our educators, admins, hospital staff, you name it, we've served them in our program. Next slide. Home building, here you go, Chad.
All right. Lastly, so, yes, as mentioned, we build about 70 homes per year or rehab them. We do everything from single families up to row homes, back-to-back condos, that sort of thing. So the Heights actually is a very good fit for us for a medium density type project. And so, although this is just draft at this point, we started conceptualizing, putting some massing thoughts together. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we work in this Seven County Metro. Next slide. I already said this. Next slide. There we go. There we are. So there's 4 3-acre blocks out there that we as Twin Cities Habitat are partnering with Sherman and Johnny Parhon. These 4 3-acre lots would be our medium density development work. So the bottom of the page would be the west side. North is to the left. To give you an idea. So it's a transition from the single family to the west, and then we would work towards density as you work away from that to the east. So on the bottom of the page, which would be more adjacent to the single family homes, we have twins and singles typically. And then on the back side of that, facing the light industrial, that would be out there, would be the more dense multi. They range from single family homes up to, in the middle there on the top, you'll see the fourplex. Again, proposed, a lot of work to do with our partners of Sherman and St. Paul Port Authority and the city. And next slide. This is what it looks like in a more of a rendering perspective. We will have windows on all of our homes. From a sustainability perspective, that works really well. Get rid of those windows. Next slide.
Keeps the cost down. too.
Keeps the cost down. Look how much money we would save with that yellow house.
Boring to live in.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. Thank you. Always looking for architectural feedback. And so again, that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Next slide. Time wise, you know, the nice thing about Habitat is we are able to move relatively quickly compared to most developers. When the site gets remediated, we'll likely be starting pretty quick right after that. Next slide, I think is done. That shouldn't be in there. We care about safety.
All right. Well, if we can zoom back to the
Portia is with us 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks. Yay. And Portia, you know, we are very lucky to have her. She completely understands, you know, who our consumers are. How can we eliminate barriers to get them on that journey to home ownership? Portia, you want to say any more?
Well, I support everything that they have. But no, I really came to Habitat because of, you know, we not only create beautiful homes, but we also get people ready to get into those homes. So they stay in those homes, but we have a very, very low default rate, which is something to definitely big up because as we know, you know, through hard times, even through COVID and all those things, we are still able to keep our families in homes. And we do a lot to make sure that they're ready and we're a resource for them if they need anything throughout their home ownership journey, after closing, you know, things like that. So I'm really excited to be doing this work and
yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people that are gonna buy these houses will come through my division, and I'm excited about that. So, thanks.
Thank you.
As a former colleague of Portia's, I can't understate her passion for this work, and I'm so glad she's part of Habitat, and Habitat's part of this project, so. Yeah, thank you.
Well, we're a little after 8, so I'll just be very quick here, and then we can take questions across the partnership of all 3 organizations, companies. For the multifamily, you can see here in a kind of fairly small grid, 5 multifamily buildings that we're initially thinking about. With there being 3, what we're calling workforce market rate. We're a part of and paying very close attention to the city of St. Paul's and the East Side's narrative around displacement, and seeking to not only not cause displacement, but have the Heights be a place where anyone who's living in East St. Paul for either opportunity or need or desire would want to come to the Heights and could afford to do so. And so when it comes to market rate, we're calling it workforce market rate. And then we will have 2 low-income historic tax credits, or excuse me, low-income tax credit projects, subsidized affordable projects as well. Altogether, bringing in about 900 units across mixes of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. And you can see in the lower right corner how the rent would frame up across the properties, whether they are studio, 1, 2, or 3 bedroom, with the very highest and most bedrooms at 80% area median income being around $2,400 a month, 60% being $1,830, 50% being $1,525, and then 30% $915 a month. Our vision is to include some commercial, community commercial, perhaps a local coffee shop, perhaps some other lifestyle amenities that would be helpful and augment not only the people who live in the apartments and the single family homes, but the new park that St. Paul is going to put in here, potential for senior assisted living, opportunity for deeply affordable units, and of course, a focus on sustainability. And so all incomes, all ages, and a place where the East Side can call home if you're on the East Side right now. Johnny, do you have any other further thoughts to offer? And then, of course, we can be available for questions.
Johnny, you're coming through in a.
Yeah, it's a little distorted.
No.
I think it's still distorted. I don't know.
No worries, Dan.
Yep. Hey, that worked.
Is that better? Okay. So
There you
jail companies would be developing B1, which is the LIHTC portion for families. So that would be, pending obviously remediation, work with the port, could be potentially 3rd quarter of next year, 2024. Obviously, of course, Catherine spoke on the level of support that we're going to need in terms of, working with the city and, looking at different resources wherewithal in order to be able to get these, buildings built. And I would say lastly, as I mentioned earlier, our companies really focus on making sure that the same level of quality that you would find in the downtowns and the suburbs when it comes to multifamily, that you would also find when it comes to low-income housing tax credit projects. I really pride myself on that. And the fact that this is family, knowing that, there could be multi-generational families there, there could be children, of course. We want to make sure that we put in the highest quality product so we can see that those doors, the cabinetry, every unit having a washer and dryer, having access to underground parking, you name it. When you give someone something nice, there's a high propensity that they're going to treat it nice. In the 2040 comp plan for the city of St. Paul, it talks about if you have an affordable development adjacent from a market rate, we don't want to tell the difference. They should effectively look the same. And that's the same level of quality that I believe not only Habitat for Humanity, but Sherman and Associates, as well as JO companies will be bringing to the Heights. So we're really excited about this partnership. with the community, and looking forward to working with you all on the Heights. Thank you.
And then finally, I'll just say, the opening phase, and this will be multi-phase, would include Sherman developing one of the workforce market rates alongside Johnny and JO Company's low income historic tax credit family project on the north end, right on Labrador. And then Habitat would likely begin on the south end, and we'd sort of be like moving our way to the middle through different phases. All right, I think we covered it, Catherine and Habitat team and Johnny. I know we're now at 15 over, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the housing team for being here online and virtually. But I hope to the community, hopefully you feel like we heard you and what you were looking for in home ownership options, wide variety, being open to everyone. We think we found a great team of partners that bring super high quality, sustainable products that aren't gonna gentrify the neighborhood at the same time. And resources to help folks who really want to be homeowners be successful at it. So certainly any questions for us, any of the housing teams, thank you for your patience tonight. If you gotta get out of here, I hear you. Otherwise, grab Rick or my card or George's card or something on the way out. If you have questions, feel free to follow up. Lisa will help get you to us as well. And our website is a fantastic resource.
And I did record too, so if any of you would like to get a copy, just email Annie or myself and we'll make sure a copy of tonight's presentation gets to you.
And the slides too.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
I'll leave you my other flash drive.
Okay, fantastic.
I have a question. Do you know who's gonna own the senior assisted living?
The senior assisted living.
Yeah.
So that will be developed by Sherman, I believe. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's
But the
correct.
ownership at the end is yet to be determined.
Yeah, and the assisted living is a program idea. We would partner with another company to actually be the operator of assisted living. We currently do own and operate income restricted senior apartments, market rate senior apartments, and have appropriate programming and lifestyle supports. But assisted living is a different level, and we want to explore that because that can be a very meaningful part of a community like this as well. And we would find another operator to partner. But Sherman would likely own the property, and we would just have an operator who would assist with that deeper level of staffing care.
And just so you know, Dan, in our neighborhood, we only have one assisted living, and that is the American Indian Elder Lodge. So assisted living is something that is really important in this neighborhood.
That's very good to hear. And it's why probably it's on our list, and we will do a full deep dive exploration for that.
What assisted living or just nursing home in general, just speaking from an immigrant population, which the east side is hugely immigrated. A lot of immigrants typically do not put their parents, especially if they're ailing, in a assisted living or just because of cultural norms. And so I think factoring that into the neighborhood, especially the east side, I think that's something to consider as we think about what we're building, because I think this neighborhood is going to continue to be very much diverse. And so we want to make sure that we're putting in things that attract those diversity.
I really appreciate that. I have a mother-in-law who is 87 and does not want to leave her home. And we have family like very much around her in her home, which would be very much like one of the Habitat homes. And so adaptability to aging in place and ensuring that families could remain in and around and maybe even living with, I think would be important parts of our considerations. Thank you for that comment.
And I would only add that one, I come from an immigrant background from Nigeria, and that sentiment is very important to us in terms of making sure that as our parents age, that they know that their children will take care of them. So that's a very important point, and something that we take very seriously. So that was a great comment. Thank you so much.
Anything else? Thank you guys all so much for your time and extra time today.
And like I say, if you do come up with any questions that you think about on the way home or next week, just either shoot Catherine an email or Rick or myself, and we can make sure that they get answered. So thank you, all the poor people and all the housing folks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Look forward to being in person. Take care.
Yeah, take care. Thank you all.
At least I do like Mario too.